Optimism is hopefulness about the future and generally believe that one will experience good instead of the bad outcomes in life. In this week's episode, your hosts, Shakti and I, will explore what we learned about staying optimistic and whether it matters. So, why should we be optimistic? Research has shown that hopeful people are less prone to heart disease. I will link to this research article below. It's also way more fun to hang out and be friends with a positive person than it is to be with a negative Nelly. Optimists get depressed less often. We thought these were pretty good reasons to see if we can force ourselves to be optimists for a week.
I took an online test to find out if I'm an optimist or pessimist, and my results were like 85% optimist and 25% pessimist. It really didn't add up to 100, but I guess the point is everything is a spectrum, and I lean more on the optimism end of the spectrum. I'd say that's sort of true. I do tend to get very excited about things and mostly assume that it's all going to work out. I get my hopes really high, definitely count my chickens before they hatch. But thankfully, I've learned how to handle disappointment pretty well. When I was younger, when I faced some of my first big disappointments in life and career, I took it pretty hard and didn't know how to cope. But I think with time and age, I just focus on what next as much as possible. I do feel disappointed and even now, but I think I find it a little more easier to move on now.
On the same test, I scored 75% for optimism and 33% for pessimism. I can't say I'm surprised about 33% though, because I think I tend to think of worst case scenarios a lot. The past few years have been some of the happiest in my life, and I'm constantly worried that something awful is going to happen to take that away from me. Why do I deserve this happiness? Is it a game of luck? I'm also very hesitant to say that I'm good at something because of the fear of disappointing myself or others. I think my pessimism is my defense mechanism to keep me from being hurt. I think if I tell myself that I'm not very good at something people tell me I'm good at, then if I make a mistake, I won't feel as bad. The other part I'm ashamed to say is superstition. If I don't embrace the happiness in my life, if I keep it at bay, then maybe nothing bad will happen and maybe it won't be taken away from me. So this week for me was a huge risk. I was risking being an optimist because I think on a normal day-to-day basis, I try not to be too happy about something.
Okay, that's interesting because I used to feel a little superstitious too about something a little different. I used to feel superstitious about telling people what I want because I thought if I tell them it won't happen, and I also would be scared that if I tell them and it doesn't happen, I look like fool. But now I don't know, maybe it's all the books on secret and vision boards and all the hipster things that you hear about a lot these days. I feel like I'm starting to believe that if I tell people what I want, it'll happen. And
So what kind of things, is it small things or big things?
mostly big things or even small things. Like if I keep saying that I want a certain thing, I feel like it does happen.
Okay.
Um, and if and also you start to think along those lines. Say if you want a new job, you start saying I want it, and in a positive way, not like a whiny, oh my God, I
Mhm.
want a job but do nothing about it way.
Mhm.
Then I think that it will happen. It'll take time, but it'll happen because your mind is constantly there, and then you'll take actions to get there.
Mm. As
Um,
opposed to when you don't accept it even to yourself, then you don't do anything about it.
yeah, that's what I think happens
Mhm.
to me now. So I do tell people, but I don't tell the whole world because I'm
Okay.
so not the type of person to tell strangers or even like acquaintances. I don't
Yeah.
share too much with them. But I try to tell my close friends or my husband and my parents maybe. Um,
Mhm.
so hoping that it'll come true.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what are some things you tried this week that worked for you?
So, strategies that worked for me. To handle this, I decided to note down every time I was being a pessimist, figure out the reason why, and also come up with at least one positive aspect of it. One example of this was at work. I was starting something new and I feared failure. But this time I thought about why I feared it. It was just because this was something I have never worked on before. So I gave myself a pep talk and banished the fear and negativity. Here's the thing, whether or not I was worried, I was going to do the work and complete it by the time that it was due. There was no way around it. This fear was really doing nothing for me. It's just an extra load that I was carrying, which served no purpose. I thought about at least one thing that I was grateful for every day. Gratitude brings about positivity, and positivity makes it easier to be an optimist. I did this little task every evening as I was driving back from work, and I feel like it left me feeling quite positive and happy for the rest of the evening. And also, I want to say that the stuff that I was supposed to do at work, I actually finished it.
Oh,
So
nice.
why be worried about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, people tend to fear the unknown and the new things.
yeah.
But the gratitude thing is interesting because I've been hearing a lot about people keeping gratitude journals and like 5-minute journals. They write about what they're thankful for at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, and that's supposed to make you feel good about life and focus on the
Yeah,
positive.
I feel like I did that at like, a long time ago, maybe a year ago, but I feel like every day I ended up being happy about the same
Same
thing. So I was
things.
like,
I
why
know.
keep a journal?
Yeah, it's hard to change things up when it's every day. Maybe a weekly or monthly journal would be more interesting.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah, that might be more feasible. Because otherwise, every day I'm like, oh, I'm happy that I have a family. I'm happy that I have a job, and I'm happy for the same things.
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't change up at all.
Yeah, maybe then you should challenge yourself by saying you don't write about those obvious things and then write about
Oh
the
man,
smaller
yeah.
things.
Maybe we should make that a topic for one
Yeah,
week.
a week. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
Okay.
All right. So for me, on good weeks when I'm pretty happy and there's nothing disastrous, that is
Hmm.
melodramatic, but nothing bad's going on.
Disastrous.
Yeah, I find it really easy to be optimistic. On
Okay.
other weeks, when something's really bothering me, real something real that's bothering me, not like imaginary things of what's gonna happen, worrying about the. It's not really worrying about the future, more like something in my life that's not going right. Then it's a little harder to be optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, the past few weeks, it's not been too bad. My only biggest challenge was I had an elderly relative visiting us and staying with us, and like most people of the older generation, this person has a lot of views that I found tough to digest or just downright offensive. I
Mm-hmm.
try not to argue with the previous generation, and because I feel like there's no point because they're old and they're set in their ways. I would just get worked up for nothing, and I'd get a lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend once said something to me that sort of stuck with me. She said that it's way more important to have these conversations and argue with our generation and the next than with the previous because they're not really affecting culture as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This probably sounds ageist, but and I don't even know if it's statistically true, but I mean I'm talking about like the 70-year-olds, not the
Yeah.
50, 60, because they're definitely affecting culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that sort of gave me another way to convince myself to just ignore these statements that made me feel negative and made me feel down.
Mm-hmm.
So this week I tried to look for humor in these, like what would a stand-up comic take from these and joke about it? These racist comments or these really rude jokes. So I tried to find the humor in this, and I also like it helped to tell some of my close friends about this and joke about it with them, and then I just laugh about it and move on. So I think humor helped to not take things as well as yourself too seriously, which I think is a big reason why people worry a lot.
So were you able to bring in humor every time, or did that sometimes not work?
It worked most times, but sometimes when it was too much, especially because we were on the road together, and
Mm.
when you're on the road, you're stuck with people
Yeah,
in the
you can't
car.
even escape.
There's
Yeah.
no like, oh, I'll just go get something from the kitchen, or you can't like leave the place.
Yeah.
Then it gets a little harder. Then I would have to like vent to my husband a little bit, and then I'll just forget about it. But
Okay.
um, but yeah, it's something I can't help. I can't do anything about. So I
Hmm.
didn't want to get too worked up about it. It's that person's opinion, not mine. So anything else that you noticed this week?
I've noticed that the news always makes me feel depressed, especially last week with the alligator attack in Florida, the various shootings, the attack of the police officer in Paris. I felt myself getting bogged down with all of this. I have a weather and news widget on my phone. I check my phone now after I'm done with my evening workout at about 9:30 or 10 p.m. And when I do this, I look at this little snippets of news and start clicking on them one by one. When the news is sad, I feel sad, and there goes my night. I So I decided to uninstall this news widget on my phone. I still catch up on the news at work because I think it's important to stay well informed. However, I don't need it right before going to bed.
Yeah. This reminds me of our friend who seeks out sad news and shares them when she's sad
I
and
know, and
makes
it
us
always
all,
happens
brings us
at
all
night.
down. Yeah. Yeah.
Right
Thankfully,
before
I'm
bedtime.
asleep by the time she shares these news. So,
Hey, she hasn't done this in a while.
yeah.
Hmm.
I guess she's happy. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
uh,
news makes me sad too a little bit.
yeah.
Especially stuff that happens to women and helpless women who
And
can't do
children,
anything.
right?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
really
now
bothers me.
anytime I read any news about like little kids, like what happened to that police officer and his family, I think of like my son
Yeah,
in all the babies that are affected, and it's awful.
yeah,
So I kind of try to stay with NPR for news because I feel like their news is more news-like and it's not as depressing. Whereas when you look at CNN, it's always the shocking news that they
yeah. And they get
bring, you know?
and they tell the personal story, the heartwarming, heart-wrenching story,
Yeah,
just to get the ratings, and that makes you really sad.
yeah.
I think the only other thing that I had to add was another strategy that works for me in general is I'm a big dreamer and I keep dreaming about things, and like I said, count my chickens before they hatch. So I
Hmm.
sort of start visualizing how things would be once I get what I want to get,
Mm-hmm.
and that keeps me focused on the positives automatically. I'm not stressed about what if it doesn't happen. But then it's sort of a little scary for people who who take disappointment really hard.
Yeah.
Then it gets
Okay.
really hard to because it sort of gets your hopes up because you're thinking about it happening. But I think I don't know, I'm like a golden retriever. I'll just find another thing to be excited about, and it works for me
That's awesome.
in most cases. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I feel like even when I do face disappointment, like the disappointment itself is not that bad for me. Like I get over that pretty quickly. So I just
yeah.
don't know why I'm being such a pessimist before to save myself from the disappointment because even when the disappointment happens, it's usually not that bad.
Yeah, I think I used to be a little like that in college. Like I would mainly with things like like I would say like a lot of people in our college would say, oh, I didn't study at all when they would have actually studied just
Yeah.
so that if things go bad, it
Hmm.
doesn't look like, oh, you put so much work and you didn't do well.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
must
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
dumb. It's like that's fear of what people think of us. I think is what makes us
Hmm.
defend ourselves by saying, "Oh, I didn't make any effort," so that when you get the
Yeah.
good scores, you're like, "Ah, man, this girl is smart."
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it comes from what other people think of us too.
I think overall, this
It
challenge
was
sort of helped.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. I just have to keep this going.
Well, like that's the case with all our challenges. Keeping it
Correct.
going is the hard
Yeah,
part.
I think we should do like a recap, maybe 1 week of all the things that we've done before. Maybe every 10 weeks or something. We do a
Yeah,
recap of the previous 10 and try to implement all 10 at once, maybe.
yeah, that'll be nice.
Okay, so next week we're going to work on our resume and applying for new jobs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, join us in our weekly goals for self-improvement and let us work together on becoming a better version of ourselves.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.